Morning, learning Tractate Shabbos, chapter 17. The name of the chapter is called Akelim. We're holding by Kuf Chaf Daled 124. So we spoke, the last discussion we have was in regard to shechting if Pesach falls on Shabbos. So you would be, so you'd have to, you have to shech the Korban Pesach Shabbos. So let's say Yudaled is going to be, Yudaled is Shabbos, 14 is Shabbos, not Friday, Shabbos. And Motzei Shabbos would be the Seder night. Motzei Shabbos is the first night of Pesach.
Right.
So back then you would have to eat the Korban Pesach on Motzei Shabbos. But you have to prepare it. In order to eat the Motzei Shabbos, you have to prepare it on Shabbos afternoon.
Right. So you do Shabbos?
So look what they're saying. It said, Rabbi Menashe said, when the 14th of Nisan fell on Shabbos, Maniach Yodor Kesef Chavero. Good morning, David.
Hey, Dave.
One would place his hand on his fellow's shoulder, V'yad Chavero al Ksefo, and his fellow's hand on his shoulder, V'soilu Mafshi, suspend the slaughtered Pesach, offering from their arms, and fillet it. So if you look at number 1, it says Rabbi Menashe teaches that on the Shabbos, it was forbidden to take the staffs, sticks, and therefore the people resorted to this measure to enable the filleting of the offering to take place. So they did it good morning. They did it in this way. Right, which is in the non-usual manner of filleting the Paschal offering. Glustra, this the teaching concerning a nab, this nan, for we learned in a Mishnah, neger sheyesh berosh glustra, a bolt that has a knob on its end. Yesterday we spoke about a stick that had a certain knob at its tip for the olives, right? To turn the olives. So neger shel b'rosh glustra. The Mishnah in Kelim 11:4 in number 2 it says with a slight textual variation. Number 3, the reference is to the bolt of a door that is wedged into a hole in a threshold to hold the door in place. The bolt has a knob at its end and is fit to be used as a pestle to chop garlic. It is categorized as a utensil. It's hard to picture exactly what instrument they're referring to, but it was some kind of, let's call it a garlic chopping utensil. Okay? We have today a garlic crusher. There are certain garlic crushers that I saw that have double functionality. One is that you can crush, and the opposite side of it slices the garlic in slices. It makes you push it like this, and it chops it into slices for you already. So it has knives on the other side. It chops it. So maybe it's referring to something like this because it's connecting the pestle with also garlic chop. So he writes, the bolt has a knob at its end and is fit to be used as a pestle to chop garlic.
That's number 3.
So chopping garlic, it was at the end of number 3, and it's categorized as a utensil. And in Aramaic, it's called neger. In Hebrew, nagar with a patach would mean carpenter, nagar.
uh,
And neger with the segel, and the vowels are segel. Neger is referring to that specific bolt, which was like a pestle. Sheyesh b'rosh glusta has a nub on its end. Would you say it's like a round circle, a round thing, or would you a nub of a door? So a nub at its front. Rabbi Yeshua says, "Shemto min Pesach zeh v'toile b'chaveru b'Shabbos." If we had that Gemara that Rabbi Yaakov was using, maybe it would have a picture of it. You know the Gemara of
Parisi's.
no, not Pharisi. Rabbi Yaakov, Abraham.
Oh yeah.
What Gemara did he have?
He
It
had-
was Steinsaltz, no?
Steinsaltz, yeah.
Yeah, with the pictures on it. Anyhow, so it says, one may drag it away from the door and hang it on another one on the Shabbos. But interesting, it doesn't say pick it up, it say shomto. Shomto in Hebrew is to let something fall down. Okay? It usually using this for the matzahs that you say the bracha and you let one go.
Right.
So over here it says you may drag it away. It doesn't say to pick it up, it doesn't say carry it, drag it away from this door and hang it on another one on the Shabbos. Rabbi Tarfon says it is like all utensils, umetaltel bechotzer, and may be moved in the usual manner within a courtyard. Another type of utensil is medoicho, the teaching concerning a mortar. Hadamon is that which we mentioned above, since all these Tanaic teachings forbid the movement of a utensil for the sake of its use, like for the purpose of using it, we must conclude that they were taught before this type of movement was permitted.
So wait a minute. At one point, this was Asur, then it became Mutter. The rabbis made.
Yeah, that's what we
at
said.
point.
We learned yesterday the different levels of leniencies that they went from one to the next. So we ended up saying
And how they can do that within the Masorah is very interesting.
we said yesterday. They asked, they permitted, they further permitted, and then they further permitted, right? There was,
Right.
so it says in the beginning, they said, what is permitted? Something that is used primarily for permitted work. They said for the sake of its use, you got to use it, you're allowed to use it. Example of something that is permitted for, let's say a knife.
Yeah.
You cut something, you're allowed to use it. It's being used, that's the easiest one. It's being used during the week, even during the week for permitted work. Like this is being used during the week for permitted work. Doesn't say anywhere you're not allowed to clean your glass. But scissors, that's already prohibited work.
Right.
For example, so he says, what is the second one? Something that melachta le'eter, another example, meaning that the melacha that you do with it is permissible,
Right.
and you don't need to use it. You actually need the place where it's sitting on. I don't want it over here, so I'm allowed to move it to here.
Right.
That's the tzorch mekoyma. And then they made another leniency. They said something that is usually being done for prohibited work, like this. I'm not allowed to erase stuff on Shabbos, right?
Okay.
Eraser.
Right.
Melachto le'isu, letzorech gufoi, ein letzorech mekomolo. Only for the sake of its use, you're allowed to. For the sake of its use, you're allowed to. What are you allowed to do? What is the example the Gemara brought? The blacksmith hammer to crack a nut.
Yeah.
Blacksmith hammer is being used for prohibited work
Yeah.
on weekday.
Yeah.
meaning it's not prohibited on weekday, but it's prohibited on Shabbos, the use that usually is being done with that hammer, right? Now, if you're a carpenter or you're a blacksmith guy, then Shabbos you don't touch his utensils, right? You don't touch the tools, but you need to crack a walnut.
Right.
What do you do? So he says, in order to use it, you're allowed to. But you're not allowed to move it because you need the space.
Right.
He said, but still you have to do it v'shinui. Even though you're using the blacksmith hammer to crack a nut, something that is usually forbidden, the use of it is usually forbidden, but since you're using it for something permissible, you're allowed to, but you need to do b'shinui. What does b'shinui do with one hand, not two hands?
Right.
And then they said, they even went further and said, Kol hakelim nitolim, all utensils can be taken on Shabbos or can be moved on Shabbos, but with two hands. If they must be taken with two hands, except for a large saw and coulter. That was the two things that were not allowed to, they were out of the picture. You asked me, so I went back to that and I told you. Amar Rabba, Rabbi Lezer's assertion is rejected. Imai, on what basis do you state that these teachings predate the permit to move all utensils? Do you guys have the Gemara, David and Pinchas?
They were getting them every time they put out a new one.
I'm curious if they have this. This is the 4 stars Gemara.
Dave, you got it?
Any Gemara has 5 stars?
No.
I don't think so.
With tops.
David, you have the Gemara? Pinchas, you have the Gemara? Amar Rabba Mimai, on what basis do you state that these teachings predate the permit to move all utensils? Perhaps I can actually tell you that they were taught. Oh, wonderful.
What happened? What did he say?
David said he has it. Now I'm just curious if Pinchas has it.
Yeah, they were getting it as they came out. As we got to the top, they were getting them.
So, perhaps I can actually tell you that they were taught after the permit to move all utensils was issued, and their explanation is as follows: concerning the tubes, what is the reason for placing them in the shulchan, in the table? Mishum iapushe, because of the concerns for decaying of the ponim bread. So if you remember I think there was probably a picture. I remember seeing it before. If you look at page 123b3, you look. Yeah, this is a shulchan, but they're now talking about the tubes, the shelving tubes.
They're on the sides there. Well,
No. They are.
Oh, I see.
They're on the table. They're in the table. Now the breads were sitting on these tubes.
Right.
I said, why did they place the bread on the tubes? Because they wanted the bread to stay fresh, so there's airy. Right. So each one, even in today's baking, if you look at the bakers after they did challah or bread, they place it on a mesh, a metal mesh that it can breathe from below. It doesn't sit on a flat surface. You understand? So over here it says, why did they sit on the shelving tubes? Because they didn't want it to decay. In this small period from Friday afternoon until Shabbos morning, it will not decay. So there's no real need to arrange or remove the tubes on the Shabbos.
Meanwhile, they were eating the challah from the week before.
Right. So they said, what are you worrying about decaying? If you can put it in Motzei Shabbos, put the bread on the. Why do you have to put it on Shabbos? Or Friday afternoon? Why does it have to be on Friday until Shabbos morning? So Gemara says, Makles, the staffs from which the Pesach offering are normally suspended, Efshar Rabbi Lozo, on the Shabbos it is possible to do as Rabbi Lozo recommends, and suspend the offerings from people's arms instead of using staffs. There is no real need to take the staffs. So even in places where you're allowed to, quote unquote, desecrate the Shabbos, you had to find ways. In the Beis Hamikdash, you had to find ways to do it in permissible way, even though it was. So in this case, they, instead of using the staffs, they used their arms, their shoulders. Gloistro, the Mishnah concerning a bolt that has a knob at its end, Kede Rabbi Yanai, can be explained in accordance with the clarification of Rabbi Yanai. Dam Rabbi Yanai, for Rabbi Yanai said, V'chotza she'en morav saskina. In this Mishnah, we are dealing with the issue of moving the bolt to a different door within a courtyard whose houses have not been joined with an eruv, and in which it is therefore prohibited to take anything from one of the houses to the courtyard. Rabbi Shua sovar teicha Pesach kilifnim domi. Rabbi Shua hold that the hollow of the doorway is like the interior of the house. And thus when one removes the bolt from a doorway and transfers it to another one, he is carrying a utensil from inside. He is carrying a utensil from inside one of the houses across the courtyard. Rabbi Tarfon holds that the hollow of the doorway is like the exterior of the house and is part of the courtyard. And thus when one transfers the bolt, he is carrying a utensil from the courtyard across the courtyard, which is permitted. As for the Baisa concerning a mortar, Rabbi Nechemiah, it is a reflective of the opinion of Rabbi Nechemiah. All four teachings can have been taught after Nechemiah ben Chachilio restriction was relaxed.
Was that the Navi Nechemiah ben Chachilio, or that's a different Nechemiah?
No, it's not a Navi. It's a rabbi.
It's a Tana.
Yeah,
Tana. Rabbi. Okay, no problem. I just was asking.
So it says in number 12 and 13, it says, therefore, Rabbi Tarfon allows carrying it from one doorway to another in the usual fashion. His statement that it is like all other utensils means that it is like the other utensils that were in the courtyard at the beginning of the Shabbos. Number 13, who permits moving, Rabbi Hanania or Rabbi Nechemiah, who permits moving a utensil only for the sake of its designated purpose. And since the designated purpose of the mortar is prohibited one, since it's prohibited, Rabbi Nechemiah forbids moving it at all on the Shabbos. This is the interpretation of the Baita that Rabbi himself proposed above. All utensils may be taken either out of necessity or not out of necessity. Rabbi Nechemiah says, they may not be taken except out of necessity. What is the meaning out of necessity and what is the meaning of not out of necessity? the Tana Kama statement that utensil may be taken out of necessity means something that is used primarily for permitted work may be taken for the sake of its use. The statement that they may be taken not out of necessity means something that is used primarily for permitted work may be moved even for the sake of its place. So, however, concerning something that is used primarily for prohibited work, the Tanakama hold that it may be moved only for the sake of its use, but not for the sake of its place. Also, Rabbi Nechemia comes to say, even something that is used primarily for permitted work, may be moved only for the sake of its use, but not for the sake of its place. So Rabba's interpretation is rejected, and an alternative one is presented. Amar li Rava, do you mean to call the movement of a utensil for the sake of its place movement not out of necessity? Why? The need for its place is as legitimate necessity as the need for its use. What's the difference if I have to use the item for its use? Use a hammer to crack the nut, or I need the place where the hammer is, and I would like to use its place. What's the difference between the two? Why the need for its place should be as legitimate a necessity as the need for its use. The Tanakama statement that utensil may be moved out of necessity means something that is used primarily for permitted work may be moved either for the sake of its use or for the sake of its place. Permitted work, you're allowed to use it, like we gave the example of a knife. Could be many other things that are permissible use. You can use it for either or, either for its own use, to cut something with it, whatever the use is, or or you need the place where it is. So you just literally need the place, so you move it off the table. The statement that they may be moved not out of necessity. What does it mean, not out of necessity? It means that something used primarily for permitted work may be moved even from the shade, moving it from the sun to the shade to protect the item. However, concerning something that is used primarily for prohibited work, the Tanakama holds letzerich gufu letzerich mekomo ein mechama letzer loy. So, concerning something that is used primarily for prohibited work, like a hammer, right? Blacksmith hammer. If you need to use it for its own use, obviously permitted use, like crack the nut, or you need the place, you're allowed to move it. But to take it away to move it from the sun to the shade to protect the item itself, because of monetary concern, that you're not allowed to do.
So wait a minute. Okay. So we're not okay. From the sun to the shade, I got that.
You're not allowed to.
Because it's right. But what? So but what is the reason you can move it out to change its place? Okay.
That's his opinion. His opinion is you're allowed to.
Okay, for him. Okay, for the Tanakama. So wait a minute. So you're not allowed to move it, but there's another reason that you can move it.
If you have a blacksmith hammer
Yeah.
in the backyard, Shabbos, you notice that it's somewhere outside, and you're afraid somebody might steal it,
Yeah.
or it might be destroyed by the heat of the sun.
Well, but that we already made that usher.
Right, it's also. But if you need to crack a nut, you're allowed to crack a nut, and if you need to break the and if you need to you need that place where it's sitting on, you're allowed to move it. But listen to this. Also, Rabbi Nechemia comes to say, Rabbi Nechemia says that even something that has permissible use, don't move it on Shabbos just because you want to protect the item. Move it on Shabbos if you need the space, or if you need to use it.
Right.
But don't just move things around on Shabbos because you're protecting the object, because you care about the object itself.
Right. Okay.
So we're holding it 124, A2 in the bottom. Yossi Rav Safra Rav Acha Bar Huna Rav Huna Bar Chanina. Going to 124, A3. Rav Acha Bar Huna and Rav Huna Bar Chanina were sitting together. V'yosvei v'kamri. And they said, L'Rabba aliba de Rabbi Nechemia. According to Rabba's interpretation of the opinion of Rabbi Nechemia, that even permitted use utensil may not be moved for the sake of its place. Hani ke'orois echim metaltelin. How can we move bowls off the table after a meal? It's permitted use, but why are you moving it now? If you don't need a place. Amaru Rav Safra, mididava agav shari, it's permitted to remove dirty dishes because they are analogous to a vessel used for excrement, which may be removed from one's presence due to the discomfort it engenders. So it's like washing off dirty vessels, so the house doesn't stink from the fish from yesterday.
Right, it's not nice to have dirty dishes on.
So the reason why you're allowed to move those bowls is because of Gav Shari. Gav Shari speaks about a vessel that was back then made for excrement, and same way that you're allowed to move this, you're allowed to move from the table the bowls.
Okay, well, that's pretty extreme analogy, but okay.
No, it's using the same.
Right. I'm saying, like, after you finish
To avoid discomfort.
No,
That's it. It's either so. This one is heavy duty discomfort, and this is.
I'm just saying, like, to have after you finish eating, you want to clear off the table because it's not nice. It's just saying the same thing.
Yeah, but how far do you go with it? You're allowed to do the dishes now?
No, you put them in the sink. You leave them.
But for some people, it's even repulsive to have dirty dishes in the sink.
No, I mean you might rinse them off.
You want to rinse them off, right?
That's not so terrible. That's okay.
Right. Yeah, there's also special sponges that you're allowed to even.
Shabbos sponges.
According to Abaisat Rabba, according to Master's interpretation of the opinion of Rabbi Nechemia, how may we move bowls from the table after a meal? Amarlei Rav Safra Chavrin Targum. Our colleagues of Safra has already explained it as follows. Midi dehava grafshri, because dirty dishes are analogs or analogous to a vessel used for excrement.
Yeah, okay.
It's analogous to it. Doesn't mean exactly the same, but the idea.
It's a concept. I got the concept. It's okay. I got it.
It's like when we say a concept we also used on Shabbos a lot, make bepatish. Make bepatish literally means that you hammering something.
Right.
That's what it means. But when you say that, it's like a code they use for many different things that would mean completing a job.
Right.
hitting the last nail in the coffin. You completed the job.
Yeah.
So completing the job is prohibited. Another example on Shabbos is we'll call a code. Another code is psik reshe. Psik reshe means cutting off the head.
Right.
But what does it mean, cutting off the head? Anything that is inevitable
Right.
is under that category of cutting off the head. So you're going to cut off the head. So I don't want to kill the animal, but I want the head.
Right.
So it's inevitable the animal will die, cut off the head. It's inevitable that if you'll do certain things, you'll cause chilul Shabbos. It's inevitable that if I lean back on the light, I'm going to turn on and off the light. So you're not allowed to do it.
Right.
So Gav Shirei is also under that. It's like a code for anything that creates a discomfort.
Right.
Abai challenged Rava on the basis of the following bias. A mortar in which garlic is usually crushed. If there is garlic in this container, in this medoicho, you're allowed to move it on Shabbos. But if not, it may not be moved on Shabbos. Rabbi can interpret this bias as referring to a case where one does not need the use of the mortar, but he needs only its place. However, how will you interpret it? Skin we are dealing with here. What are we dealing with here? It is with moving the mortar from the sun to the shade for its protection. Abai poses another challenge. He challenged Rava on the basis of the following bison. Veshovin and they, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, agree concerning a pestle. That if one has already chopped meat on it, he may not move it on Yom Tov. Rabbi can interpret this bais as referring to a case where one does not need the use of the pestle, but needs only its place. However, how will you interpret it? Here too, we are dealing with moving it from the sun to the shade.
I wouldn't have interpreted it that way. Okay.
No, they're telling you we are dealing with moving it from. That's the case that they're doing. Well, that's
let's say I had I'm chopping, doing something over here, preparing the meat. I got so I got the thing. I'm doing it, and then I'm finished. So I put the meat to cook, and this is the table, Yontif table. So I'm taking it off.
Right, but you're not chopping meat on Yom Tov. You usually do it at the kitchen, a different place, right? But regardless, he says you shouldn't be moving it according to this.
Right.
So that if one has already chopped meat on it, it may not be moved on Yom Tov, even on Yom Tov. Okay. Consider that which we learned in a Mishnah, En Simchin Sagdero Bevikas. We may not support a pot with a piece of wood on Yom Tov. V'chen bedelas, and so too a door. What's the problem with supporting a pot with a piece of wood? If you look at 24, the Gemara Beitza explaining this as meaning that we may also not support a door with a piece of wood on Yom Tov.
Okay, let's continue. Let's see what it finishes with.
Alma dov or shemelachta, since it stands to be burnt as fuel for a cooking fire. Nevertheless, the Mishnah forbids taking it even for the sake of another use. Because the Yom Tov. Now, a piece of wood is on Yom Tov classified as something that is used primarily for permissible work. Since it stands to be burned as fuel for cooking fire, you're allowed to do it on Yom Tov. Nevertheless, the Mishnah forbids taking it even for the sake of another use. Alma, what do you learn from it? Dovo shemalachta le'eter ben letzorch guf or ben letzorch mekom also. We see that something that is used primarily for permissible work may not be taken either for the sake of its use or for the sake of its place. Question mark. Also, my time. It's not so simple, David. You want to know if moving an object from the rain on Shabbos, if it's permissible.
It's the same thing with the sun, no?
Yeah, same thing like the sun. You have to and even though it's one reshus, let's say that it's still in your backyard, still in the same reshus. It would depends if the item has permissible use or it doesn't have permissible use, because there is opinions that are saying that if the item does not, even if the item has permissible use, you shouldn't move it for no reason.
All right.
And but unless it creates major discomfort, like we said with the dirty ball or the ball of excrement, that you're allowed to move it. But generally, you wouldn't be allowed to move it if it's for prohibited use. If it's for permissible use, there are opinions that are saying you would be allowed to move it. But in general, we're not allowed to move things for its protection.
Okay,
Like just say you have a wallet, right? Your wallet is on the window,
yeah.
and you say, "Oh, you know what? The cleaning lady is coming. I'm gonna take it from the window. I'll hide it somewhere." So why are you moving
To protect the wallet itself.
So if you can find a reason, say, "Okay, you know what? You have something outside, right? Let's say, David, you left your car keys outside. So you say there's still maybe permissible use using the keys to open the door, the house. So say, okay, I'm going to move it, but I'm not moving it to protect it. I'm moving it because I need that space. I want to put somewhere else on that space. So if you're putting something else on that space, the fact that you're now allowed to pick it up, you're allowed even to put it in where you usually put the keys. So there's loopholes. There's loopholes how to do it.
You're allowed to be slick.
But these loopholes are given in halacha, but in not all cases. Like, for example, a camera, it's something that is used for prohibited use.
Right.
Only.
Right.
It's not a knife. It's not a plate. It's not all these things that have also permissible uses.
Not even keys.
So since the usage is only prohibited, it would be a problem to move it on Shabbos, even though it might be very expensive camera.
Right.
So there's different opinions if you're allowed to just move things around for no reason.
Yeah.
I mean, not for no reason, for a reason that is not for its place or not for its use.
Sometimes they challenge me to essentially when I go back into the gate. Once in a while, they want my ID. I keep my ID in the wallet. So sometimes I forgot to take the ID out on Shabbos, and I opened the wallet to pull out the.
Right, so you're using something that is usually being used for prohibited use, if we can say it's prohibited use, a wallet, but you touching it for a permissible use.
Right.
So it says, what is the reason? So camera is a problem because the camera is it's only being used in a prohibited usage, prohibited way. Meaning on Shabbos, if you analyze what a camera is being used for, it's something that is prohibited to use it on Shabbos. During the week, you're not using a camera to chop down a garlic or to use it for food in any way.
Right.
So it's strictly, actually with the camera, there's another a classification. It's also classified as a very designated purpose. It doesn't have multi-purpose. You don't use the camera for self-defense. You don't use the camera for anything else, just for taking pictures, which is a prohibited use
how
on
about
Shabbos.
the phone? The phone?
Same thing with the phone.
Right. I mean, it's,
There's a question: a guy's phone rang on Shabbos. So what do you do? It's like 3 o'clock in the morning. The alarm goes off.
You can't do anything theoretically.
Because it's prohibited use.
Right.
How can you move it? You move it. You're moving it because you could say, if I need the space, might find the heter because you need the space or where the phone is.
Yeah.
Then take it and put it in the freezer, and close the door. Might you wouldn't hear it anymore. Anyhow, so camera is prohibited use, and it's going to be a problem to move it on Shabbos. Shouldn't be touching the camera on Shabbos. I know you're not touching it, but I'm saying if you need, it's not so simple to move it, because it's like 100% muktzah. It's like not there's no other use that you can use it for besides what it's meant to be.
Don't keep the phone next to the bed.
Oh, just shut it off before Shabbos, or put it on silent.
I try to shut them off before Shabbos, all the electronics.
So it says, also, my timer, what is the reason for the prohibition there in that case? Given the Shabbos dosh v'nachtal isu, since on the Shabbos a piece of wood is classified as something that is used primarily for prohibited work on Shabbos, firework may not be burnt on Shabbos. Gzeira Yom Tov ad Shabbos. So a decree was enacted prohibiting its movement on Yom Tov on account of the concern that one might also move it on Shabbos. You say, Yom Tov I was allowed to move it, so probably on Shabbos I'm allowed to do it also. So it said, don't do it on Yom Tov, so you don't come to do it on Shabbos. Maybe it should be permissible to move wood on Shabbos. Maybe. Why not? Since something that is used primarily for prohibited work may be moved either for the sake of its use or for the sake of its place, not for the sake of the item.
Right.
The sake of its use or for the sake of its place, you're allowed to. So why should we move the wood? For the sake of its place or for the sake of its use. That applies only where it is classified as a utensil. When are you allowed to move a utensil for the sake of its place or for the sake of its use? If it's considered a utensil, it's classified as a utensil. But if it's not, then you're allowed to move it. Where it's not classified as a utensil, one may not move it at all. To enact a decree prohibited doing things that are permissible on Yom Tov out of concern that people might do them on Shabbos. But not. We may lower produce through a skylight on Yom Tov, but not on the Shabbos. Do we not enact such decrees? But we learned in a Mishnah. There's no difference between Yom Tov and the Shabbos except in matters pertaining to food preparation. There's no difficulty. This Mishnah follows Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Yeshua, whereas this Mishnah follows Rabbi Yeshua. The Tanya, it was taught in the Bais Oisov, the notion of Leboyer, an animal and its offsprings. We discussed this case previously. Animal and its offspring, they fell into a pot in Yom Tov. The pit, they fell into a pit on Yom Tov. Rabbi Lezer says, one may raise the first animal in order to slaughter it, and he must then slaughter it. And for the second animal, he provides sustenance
Food.
Yeah. For the second animal, he provides sustenance in its place in the pit so that it not die. So you're allowed to take out the first one to shecht it, because you're allowed to shecht on Yom Tov. Second one, you just feed it. It's your animal. You're allowed to feed it on Shabbos, so you feed it so it shouldn't die in the pit. Rabbi Shua says, "Malet harishon mal shechato." This is a loophole. It looks like a loophole. He tells you, what do? You have two animals. You can't shecht both of them because it's oisav es benoy. It's father and son or mother and son, and you allowed to raise the first one and say, "Oh shoot, I don't want to shecht this one. I think the other one has better meat," and then raise the other one. Malas harishon, one may raise the first animal ostensibly in order to slaughter it, but he need not slaughter it then. Umarim may employ subterfuge. That's the being wise guy. Umales hasheni, to raise the second animal. Rotza the sheichet, rotza zeh sheichet. If he wants this one, he may shecht this one. If he wants the second one, he may shecht that one. So we show rules leniently in regard to exertion on Yom Tov, putting effort on Yom Tov to preclude a financial loss, while Rabbi Eliezer rules stringently. Rabbi Eliezer think differently than Rabbi Yeshua. He says Rabbi Yeshua will permit lowering produce through a skylight out of concern for financial loss, while Rabbi Eliezer forbid it. No, if you have you're in your backyard, let's say you have goats, right? You have goats. You have a mother goat and a baby goat.
Okay.
And your son dug a pit in your backyard.
Okay.
Suddenly you hear the goat making sounds, is crying inside the pit. The goat fell into the pit. So you know it's yours. You're not in the street. You're in your backyard.
Right.
You see, there's a pit in the backyard. You built the pool, right? So they dug in a whole pit to build the pool. In the meantime, the goat fell into the pool. What do you do then? So you have these two options. One opinion of Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer. One says you raise the first one and feed the other one. The second one says you can raise both. You raise the first one and say, probably the second one is better to shecht.
Yeah.
And that's it. Also, perhaps Rabbi Eliezer stated his stringent opinion there in the case of animals that fell into a pit. Ella the efshar lefarneso, only because it is possible to provide sustenance for the second animal in the pit, and thereby avoid the financial loss by feeding it so that it doesn't die. The whole Shabbos without eating. But in a case where it's not possible to provide the endangered object with subsistence, he would not forbid other measures. He might permit lowering produce through a skylight on Yom Tov to save it from the rain. Inami, similarly, a distinction can be drawn between the cases according to Rabbi Yeshua. So far, Rabbi Yeshua stated his lenient opinion only there. Because it is possible to employ subterfuge. But you can't do this shortcut, this trick. But in case where you cannot do it, you cannot employ the subterfuge, you shouldn't do it. He would not rule leniently. So the dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua is therefore not with me.
Yeah.
The dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua is therefore not analogous to the matter of lowering produce through a skylight. That's your word, so
I know.
making sure.
I just did a few times, that's all.
And the contradiction between the two Mishnahs is still not resolved. So So the Gemara advances another resolution to the contradiction. Elam Rav Papa said, Lo Kashya. There is no difficulty. Ha Beit Shammai, ha Beis Hillel. This latter Mishnah, which applies all the Shabbos rabbinic prohibitions on Yom Tov, follows Beis Shammai. Ha Beis Hillel, whereas this previous Mishnah, which permits lowering produce through a skylight on Yom Tov, even though it is forbidden on Shabbos, follows Beit Hillel. That not. We learned in the Mishnah Beis Shammai Emrim, Ein moitzim esakot, we're not allowed to take out minor. Ve'esa lulav and lulav ve'sefer Torah u'shusarabim, and sefer Torah into a public domain. Uve'silul matirin 124b1. Ve'silul matirim. Similarly, Beis Hillel would permit one to lower produce through a skylight on Yom Tov, whereas Beit Shammai would not.
So we take on Simchas Torah. We like to go out in the street with the Sefer Torahs.
Right. The Gemara attempts to reject this comparison as well. Eimad l'shamat le'Beit Shammai hoitzo tiltul mishamotle. When you can say that you heard Beit Shammai compare Yom Tov to the Shabbos, it is only in regard to transferring objects from private to a public domain. Tiltul mishamotle, in regard to merely moving something within a private domain, did you hear them make this comparison? V'tiltul gufei lav mishum etzoi was moving itself not prohibited on account of the concern that it might lead to transferring. Certainly it was. Therefore, since Beit Shammai compare Yom Tov to the Shabbos in regard to transferring, they must also compare it in regard to moving. Having rejected all the challenges, the Gemara cites a view concurring with that of Rava. Rav Sovar lo the Rav. And Rav also concurs with that opinion of Rava, who equates moving an object for the sake of its place with moving it for the sake of its use. Dama Rava for Rav said, Dama Rav, Mar shelo yigonev, moving a hoe so that it not be stolen. Hoe, shovel, plowing utensil, moving a hoe that it's not be stolen. You're afraid for the shovel. You're afraid for the hoe.
Right.
You're not worried about. You don't need the place, or you don't need to use it.
Right.
It says tiltul sheloi letzorich ve'osur. This is an example of moving something not out of necessity, and it is forbidden.
But we learned this already.
So one second, it says time sheloi gonev. This implies that the reason it is deemed not out of necessity is that one is moving it only so that it not be stolen,
right,
for its own protection. But moving it either for the sake of its use or for the sake of its place is permitted. So Rav concludes with Rava. The Gemara says, is this indeed so? Rav Kana visited the house of Rav on Shabbos Omar, and Rav said to members of his household, I too lay shusalechana lay savalei, bring the trap for kahana to sit on. What does it mean? Why did Rav need to specify that the trap would be used as a seat? Lav lememra, was it not to say by implication, the dover shemalachtoi leisu letzorich gufoi ein letzorich mekom oloi, that something like a trap which is used primarily for prohibited work may be moved only for the sake of its use, such as sitting on it, but not for the sake of its place. In fact, the incident was not as you describe it, but rather this is what Rav told them. Shkulu shusa mekamei kahana. Take away the trap from before of kahana, from before Kahana. Rav actually had them move the trap for the sake of making its place available. Now, trap is something that's forbidden on Shabbos, for sure. But he said, move the trap so Rav Kahana can sit.
Yeah.
Rav actually had them move the trap for the sake of making its place available for Rav Kahana to sit down. He holds that a forbidden use utensil may be moved even for the sake of its place. Or if you prefer, say that the incident was as originally described. Also, that the trap was being moved from the sun to the shade. Rav specified that he needed to use the trap as a seat to preclude the notion that it was sanctioning moving it for its own protection. He wanted to say, hey, I'm moving it from the sun to the shade, but that's not my intention. My intention is that Rav Kahana would have something to sit on.
Right.
Be scary to sit on a trap, but it might be trapped. Yeah, it might be trapped. A related incident is cited Rav Mori Baruch Elavaleai Beis Hadiyoso V'Shimshu. Mori Baruch had some felt pillows that were laying in the harmful rays of the sun. Lying in the harmful rays of the sun. Also, Rava, he came before Rava. Amar le'ma'u le'taltulino. He said to him, "What is the law with regard to moving them indoors?" Amar le'shirei. Rava replied, "It is permissible." Is liachrina. Rav Mari said, "I have others available, and do not need to use these." Chazu le'irchin. Rava replied, "These are suitable for guests." Isli nami loichim. Rav Mari retorted, "I also have other pillows for guests." Omar lei, Rava said to him, "Galis adaitoch decherabos viralach." You have indicated that you concur, you agree with Rabba, who forbids moving a permitted use utensil from the sun to the shade. This is really telling David, this is really answering your question, because over here, according to this, what happened over here? Rav Mari Bar Rochel, he had pillows that were in the sun, and they would be damaged by being in the sun. He comes to Rava, and he says, Rava asked him, can I move it? So Rava replied, "You're allowed to. It's permissible." And then Rav Mari said, "I have others available and do not need to use these." So comes Rav Mari and said, "Don't move it because I have others." Chazul Oichin, Rava replies, that these specific ones are suitable for the guest. So comes Rav Mari and says, No, I have also a specific one for the guest. He's not letting him use the loophole.
Right.
So then he says to him, "You know what? You just revealed to me that you are agreeing with Rabbah, who forbids moving permitted use utensil." Now this is things you're allowed to use, pillows. But he said, don't move it from the sun to the shade. So really, because if you're moving it from the sun to the shade, it's indication that you are taking care of it. You're worrying about the pillows being damaged. You don't care about the use of it or the place of it. Right. You care about that the object itself is being damaged.
Right.
It is permitted for everybody else to bring their pillows if they want it, but to you, since you have it, it is forbidden. It says in number 9, Rabbah was not penalizing Rav Mari, but merely informing him that since he concurred with Rabbah, he was required to abide by that opinion. The actual halacha follows Rabbah. That's an answer to your question. Listen carefully, David. The actual halacha follows Rabbah. A permitted use utensil may be moved for any purpose. Complete?
Yeah.
For any purpose, but not for but not for no purpose at all. So if you have no purpose, you're not even trying to save it, you should be moving, and a forbidden use utensil may be moved for the sake of either its use or its place, but not to protect it from loss. And you can see it in Orach Erachaim 308, 34, and this is the halacha. So if you have a camera, you're not allowed to move it because of its protection.
Right.
You're allowed to move it if you need a place, or if somehow you need its use. But again, camera is a different story because it has a very designated use. There's nothing else that you can use it for. It's made to take pictures.
How about for a tourist stop?
But it's not the common use.
Right. Okay.
But halacha is that you're allowed to move permissible items that are usually permitted for any purpose, but you need to have a purpose. You can't just move them around for no reason. Bless you. Brooms of cloth may be moved on the Shabbos. But rooms of palm leaves may not be moved. Here they mentioned your wife's name, Tamara. Tav mem reish he. Right? Aval shel Tamara loy. The brooms of palm leaves may not be moved. Rabbi Lezer Eimer, af shel Tamara, even brooms of palm leaves may be moved. B'maya skinan, with what type of moving are we dealing? If you will say that it is with moving the broom for the sake of its use in a permitted capacity or for the sake of its place, would Rav say in regard to this case that when it is made of palm leaves, it may not be moved? Rav concurs with Rava and permits moving a forbidden use utensil for the sake of its use or place. Rather, you might say that we are dealing with moving the broom from the sun to the shade for its protection. Would Rabbi Lezer say in regard to this case that even a broom of palm leaves may be moved? Why? The Gemara says nobody permits moving a forbidden use utensil from the sun to the shade. The Gemara answers by amending Rabbi Lezer's opinion. Le'olam mechamo latzel, le'olam mechamo letzel. Actually, we are dealing with moving the broom from the sun to the shade. Ema v'chen Omar Rabbi Lezer, and say Rabbi Lezer said likewise that brooms of cloth may be moved from the sun to the shade, but brooms of palm leaves may not be moved.
So you're not allowed to sweep up the floor on Shabbos?
Allowed to. Rabbi Lezer does not argue with Rav, but concurs with him. We cite another type of shit. Yeah, you are allowed to. It's the same thing of Graf Shulei that we said.
About the
discomfort.
Right.
And it's not per se prohibited use. You can say that a broom is prohibited use.
No, if you say you're allowed.
In today's flooring, it's okay, but back then it would be prohibited because it's leveling. Dirt floors, so you're leveling. It's a problem with leveling, like filling holes and making it flat.
Tile, you don't have this issue.
Tiles and laminate and vinyl flooring. There's no.
There's a carpet things you can use that are not muktzah.
But you have to be careful not to go on a cleaning spree on Shabbos. Right?
No, I'm just saying, if you finish
but there's crumbs on the under the table and food on the table. You're allowed to sweep it up.
I'm just saying that,
in honor of Shabbos.
Right.
Yeah.
Clean the under the table from eating the Suda.
New Mishnah kol hakelim and tolim b'Shabbos shivrenu tolim imon. All utensils that may be taken on the Shabbos, fragments of them may also be taken with them. So utensils and their parts, fragments of them, provided that they can still be used to perform some sort of work, even the fragments. Shivra arevo lechas bones piachavis. For example, fragments of a mixing bowl may be taken if they are fit to be used to cover the mouth of a cask. Shivas chuchas lechas bones pi hapach, and fragments of glass if they are fit to be used to cover the mouth of a flask. Rabbi Uda says, Bilvad shioisim melachton. Fragments may be taken provided that they can still be used to perform a semblance of their formal task. For example, fragments of a mixing bowl may be taken if they are fit to pour porridge into them. Remember we spoke about porridge?
Porridge, yeah.
I think it's like
Oatmeal.
Oatmeal, yeah. And fragments of glass if they're fit to pour oil into them, so they still have some containing capacity. The dispute pertains to a case where the utensils broke before the Shabbos, and its basis is the Mar Sova. Rabbi Uda holds that the fragments retain their previous classification as a utensil. Only if they can still be used to perform a semblance of their former task, meaning something similar to what was used before, but not if they can merely be used to perform a different sort of task. If it's something completely different, then it's not designated use or similar to its original designated use. Umar Sova, whereas the other master holds, Tanakama, that they retain their classification as utensil even though they are fragmented. And even if they can merely be used to perform a different sort of task, they're allowed to. But that's all what we said up till now is if they broke before Shabbos. If they broke on the Shabbos itself, all agree that they are permitted for use, for since at the onset of the Shabbos they were prepared, so to speak, quote unquote, prepared by virtue of being part of the whole utensil. They remain permitted even after breaking. We may fuel a fire with undamaged wooden utensils on Yom Tov. Undamaged wooden utensils on Yom Tov. Which is like taking a pot that is made out of a bowl and made out of wood and putting it in the fire, using it to start the fire. We may fuel a fire with undamaged wooden utensils on Yom Tov, but we may not fuel it with fragments of broken utensils. The Nishbu Emas, in the Braisa's case, when did the utensil break? If you will say that they broke before Yom Tov, then the fragments are ordinary pieces of wood, and were certainly prepared before Yom Tov to be used as firewood. Rather, it is not clear that they were dealing with a case where they broke on Yom Tov itself. Baita teaches that we may fuel a fire only with undamaged utensils, but may not fuel it with fragments of utensils. There is a Tana who holds that fragments of utensils which broke on Yom Tov are not considered prepared for use by virtue of having been part of the whole utensil at the onset of Yom Tov. According to your explanation, we cannot attribute the Brisa to any Tana.
So the wooden pot broke on Yom Tov. So therefore, it doesn't become like a new entity. Like let's say the chicken that had the egg, and you can't eat the egg on Shabbos.
Right, it was created on Yom Tov.
Exactly.
That's why one opinion says it should not be used.
Right.
Rather, if anything was stated in the name of Shmuel, this is how it was stated. Shmuel. I would have said in the name of Shmuel, Shabbos, the dispute pertains to a case where the utensils broke on the Shabbos. And its basis is the Ma'asor Muchanu. Tanakama, one master holds that as long as a fragment can be used to perform some sort of task, it is still considered prepared for use on the basis of its pre-Shabbos preparation. Whereas the other master, Rabbi Yehuda, holds that unless it can be used to perform a semblance of its former task, it is considered noilud.
Newly
Born, yeah.
So wait a minute. Okay, wait a minute. We're talking Shabbos here. Okay, so the thing broke on Shabbos, and you can still use the fragments for something or for a similar task.
Similar task, yeah.
So therefore, we're saying it's mutter to use them. Okay.
No, but look at 22. It tells you noilod, literally newborn, newly formed, is a category of muktzah which includes anything that came into existence on the Shabbos.
Okay.
This type of item cannot be deemed to have been prepared for use at the onset of the Shabbos. The classic example of noilod is a newly laid egg.
Right.
In our case, the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda disagree whether a shard, piece of fragment that is fit for some new use is prohibited under the category of noilod.
If it's for a new use, then...
They disagree.
Right, okay.
So Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda disagree whether a shard that is fit for some use is prohibited under the category of noilod. Tanakama holds that anything that was functional previously and is still functional on Shabbos is considered prepared, even if it is no longer fit for its original use. Rabbi Yehuda, however, holds that if it is not fit for the same function as before, it is noilod.
Right.
Since it serves in a new capacity, it is in fact not the utensils that were here when the Shabbos began. So the Brisa cited above, which forbids fueling a fire with fragments of wooden utensil that broke on Yom Tov, follows Rabbi Yehuda.
Okay.
Aval Me'erev Shabbos, but if the utensil broke before the Shabbos, all agree that the fragments are permitted for use on the Shabbos as long as they are fit for any sort of task. Since they were prepared for the new task while it was yet day before the Shabbos began. They are classified as utensils on the basis of their fitness, even without specific designation for the new use. We may fuel with undamaged utensils on Yom Tov, but we may not fuel, when I say fuel, it means throw it into the fire.
Right.
But we may not fuel a fire with fragments of broken utensils. Tanya Ido, it was taught in other ways, another way says the same way that you're allowed to use undamaged utensils, you're allowed to use damaged utensils.
Yeah.
And then there's another way. Another way says you shouldn't use any. Undamaged, damaged. Don't use it to fuel a fire on Yom Tov. Because it's keli, that's not its designated use. Rabbi Yehuda, this vice, the first bite to follow Rabbi Yehuda, they say you use the undamaged, but you should not use the damaged ones. Rabbi Shimon, the second bite says that you're allowed to do both. Is the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, and the last bite that says you shouldn't use any is the opinion of Rabbi Nechemia. Understood? Three different opinions. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Nechemia. Pursuant to a discussion of items that are no longer fit for the previous use, the Gemara cites a law. Amar of Nachman. Of Nachman said, Ani livne di ishtayo mi binyano shoyle taltulinihu. The bricks that were left over from construction, may be moved on the Shabbos. Okay, you're building a wall.
Yeah.
You have some bricks left. There's always a little bit of material left, right?
Right.
It says you're allowed to move it on Shabbos. The chazul is galayu, because they are suitable to recline upon. Shraginu v'dayak tzinihu. However, if one stacked them, you certainly set them aside for use in future construction, and consequently they are muktzah. So the moment that you're stacking them, they become muktzah, because it says like
It gives you different machshava.
you're planning to use it for
Right.
something.
It's not the right machshava.
It's not like you're nonchalantly moving a brick from one side to the other.
Yeah.
There's people who have they re-roof their house, so they keep some of the tiles. You see how nicely they're stacked next to the condenser outside by the air conditioning. Like you have a stack, or in the garage they stack up
My
like
wife keeps
20,
extra-
30
My
tiles.
wife keeps the extra tiles in case one breaks.
Right, you don't have to look for it, and maybe it's not going to be available anymore.
Right. Yesterday
Yeah.
she took it to the furniture store to make sure it matched with
Oh.
the furniture.
Okay, it's the wrong guy to ask, no?
Huh?
She took the actual brick to see.
I said, why do you take a picture? Why do you need that?
Right,
And she said it doesn't look the same on the phone.
right.
Anyway,
I thought she took you to see if it
she
matches.
took me in the first place. After that, I wasn't going back.
Huh.
She
So-
did whatever I said, okay, do whatever you want, and that was the end of that.
Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel Cheres Stan with the B'chotzer, small earthenware shard may be moved about inside a courtyard of a Carmelis, but not in Carmelis. Rav Nachman Didei Omar, so Carmelis non-reshut Rabim, it's not a public domain, not private domain. Area that resembles a public domain in certain respects and private domain in others. It is rabbinically prohibited to transfer items between either a private or public and a carmelis. To carry something for amis in a carmel is prohibited. Shmuel teaches that a shard may be moved about inside a courtyard where there commonly are many vessels that are fit to be covered by the shard. Since it has this particular function, you can cover a vessel with it. This shard retains its previous classification as a utensil, and it is not muktzah. This follows the opinion of Tanakama. However, one may not move a shard in a carmelis, even within 4 amis. A carmelis does not usually contain vessels for which the shard could serve as a cover, while in a carmelis the shard is muktzah. So in private domain, the shards will be good, regular items that you can move on Shabbos because you might cover a vessel with it. There's open vessels in private domain. But in Carmelis, there's likelihood that vessels are slim, gets a smaller area, and therefore the shard, earthenware shard, will be muktzah. Rav Nachman stated his opinion, one may move it even in Carmelis. You're not allowed to move it. Even in public domain, you're allowed to move it. Rava follows his own reasoning. The Rava was walking in the main thoroughfare of Mechoiza, the main street of Mechoiza, walking downtown Mechoiza. It vase mesone tino. His shoes became soiled with mud. Also, Shammai, his servant, came along. He took a shard that has been laying in the public domain and began to wipe the mud off forever. The rabbis who had been accompanying Rava shouted at him to stop. Omar Rava thereupon said, Lo mistayal delei gemire. Not only did these rabbis not learn that it is permitted, what is permitted and what is forbidden, migma nami megamwe, they even teach others their erroneous views. If the shard were in a courtyard, would it not be fit to be used to cover a utensil? Achanami chazil didi. Here too, in the public domain, it is fit for me to use to scrape mud off my shoes. In the name of Shmuel, so the lid of a cask that was shattered, may be moved on the Shabbos. So the lid of a cask that was shattered, it, the lid, and the shards of the cask may be moved on the Shabbos, but one should not repair one of its shards. In order to be able to cover a vessel with or to support the legs of a bed with it. And if one threw the lid in a trash heap, it is forbidden for use on the Shabbos. Papa objected to this, but now according to this, will you also say that if one threw his garment in a trash heap on the Shabbos, it is similarly forbidden for use. A utensil should not lose its classification as such merely because it was discarded. If you throw something, doesn't mean that the object is no longer losing its designation. If you have a hammer and you threw it, doesn't mean it's not a hammer anymore. Elam Rav Papa, this is what the Vice is saying. If one threw the cover in a trash heap while it was yet day before the Shabbos, it is forbidden. It is prohibited for use on the Shabbos.
As being garbage.
Right, because you discarded it in this. Certainly,
right.
so
you could have used it for something if you kept it. All right.
Someone discarded undamaged garment before the Shabbos, it would not become muktzah, since it is fine utensil. Okay, so in number one, it differentiates between fine utensils and utensils that are not fine. In this case, when we read number one, in this case, the person has indicated before the Shabbos that the cover will no longer be used as a utensil, the cover for the barrel.
Yeah.
Since it was not prepared for use when the Shabbos began, because he discarded it, it is muktzah. Now, if someone would discard it would not become muktzah. Why? For since it is a fine utensil, we do not take it into account. We do not take into account its lack of desirability to its owner. However, the cover of a broken utensil does not necessarily stand to be used any longer. And when one relegates it to the trash heap before the Shabbos, we recognize its act as stripping it of its classification as a utensil. It is only where the cover was prepared at the onset of the Shabbos that we say the owner cannot strip it of its classification on the Shabbos by discarding it.
Okay, let's say you throw out the garment on Erev Shabbos. So now you have a from dumpster diver come along, and you know what a dumpster diver is?
Yeah, somebody's that jumps into the garbage. Yeah.
So could this guy take out would it be a mutter for the guy to take out?
It says that you're allowed to, because since it is a fine utensil, we do not take into account its lack of desirability.
If you put it out on a curb, it becomes a hefker, and your from dumpster diver comes around and takes it.
Yeah, but the point is that you cannot strip object out of its classification on the Shabbos by destroying it. We'll learn halacha. 1 second. I'll be right back.